Hi, and welcome to my channel, Rolling into Retirement. I'm Mike. Thanks for joining me on this journey today. I appreciate you being here. So today I thought I would do a bit of sidetrack and talk about some of my thoughts on the use of house rules at my table. Now, I know there are a lot of rules in the RPGs we play, and that more rules aren't always the best way to approach every situation. Adding more rules can actually create more confusion than it can solve. I've read some pretty interesting stories about the rules that some GMs or DMs have at their table. To each their own, I guess. Mine are mild compared to some of the stories I've heard. For me, I use the house rules that I have, usually outlined in the session 0 or character generation session, to lay out how I run games and to give my players some guidance on what to expect. These house rules are certainly not extensive by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought it might be fun to share what I do and see what you all think. I admit I tend to play mostly with friends or people that I have talked to or know fairly well. I shy away from pickup games, except maybe at conventions, as I probably have a different way of running games than some people enjoy, and that's okay. Let's start the house rules with my all-time favorite game system, Traveler. In this case, it's for Mongoose Traveler. I'm going to lay out my 12 house rules for my game. Ready? Let's go. Rule number 1 in every game is to have fun. You would think that having fun is an obvious statement to make for a game, but I like to start out all of my house rules with this same reminder. We're here to hang out with our friends, play a game, and laugh a bit at our bad die rolls. We're not really here to get into silly arguments about made up stuff or stress about stuff in our day-to-day lives. For me, it's a time to kick some imaginary butt and just enjoy being with my friends in a game that I've been looking forward to playing. Sometimes the upcoming game session is the highlight of my week. Number 2 is to play your character. Now, there is no alignment in Traveler, so I encourage my players to play their characters the way they want to within reason. We're not here to ruin other players' game night, so I tend to discourage the role play that is focused on making things more difficult for the other players at the table. In fact, I've stopped playing with people that constantly create that drama that really doesn't need to be there. I have enough drama in my real life, I don't need it at my table. But the other part of this house rule is that the players have to know that any action that they take will have consequences. An action with no consequences creates a very sterile game environment, at least in my opinion. Now, I will admit that my players sometimes become borderline pirates because they push things just to the edge, but that's fine. And I think it is fun to boomerang an action back at them several sessions later. I think the players enjoy that as well. Number 3 is a little bit different. I don't use random encounters rolled from a table. I really dislike them as I think they're much more random than I prefer and they don't really advance the story. So the vast majority of the encounters that they'll have are either something I made up that I thought would be funny or memorable, or something that allows me to drop a clue about what's really going on. Some will actually be required as part of the adventure or a piece of the adventure that they need to be aware of. I understand that some people really like random encounters, and I totally respect that choice when I'm playing at their table. For me, though, I find the dice can be quite fickle and produce kind of silly results when I'm just randomly rolling on a table. My GM preference is to have a smaller number of tailored encounters that play into the story, but sometimes not always right there and then. I've placed Easter eggs in some sessions that paid off multiple sessions later, and my players have so far really seemed to enjoy that. I've created both funny and incredibly frustrating characters that connect to the stories that I'm telling, even if the players don't even know it yet. To me, those connections are really fun part as I wait for them to find those connections. Number 4 is be careful. Traveler combat is a lot deadlier than in other games, so the players need to realize that getting into combat can lead to some serious injury or death. I'm not going to discourage them from going in guns blazing, but they have to be aware of the consequences of it. I really like the quick and brutal aspect of combat in Traveler, unless there's a knife fight going on with an Aslan in an elevator and no one can make the rolls, but that's a story for a different day. I think many modern D&D players underestimate the damage that can be dealt and quickly learn that rushing into a situation isn't always the best answer. I've had more than one player get a face full of Gauss pistol as a reward for their actions, so reminding my players that the game can be deadly if they choose their tactical options poorly is an important part of setting the stage for my game. I don't pull any punches in combat, but I'm not actively trying to kill my players either. To me, the social contract of the game is so much more important than having my imaginary bad guys win a gunfight. That's not really fun for anyone involved. I'd do a social contract video, but I would just suggest that you watch Seth Gorkowski's video on it. It's excellent. Rule number 5 goes along with rule number 4. You could literally die from one burst of machine gun fire. I always say to my players that they could die, but this is a little bit different. Getting one physical stat, which is the strength, dexterity, endurance reduced to 0 is bad. Getting 2 of those physical stats to 0 equals unconsciousness or seriously injured. Putting all 3 of those physical stats equals dead. So you need to plan accordingly. To me, this is a reminder that their characters are pretty fragile and that their hit points don't go up like in other games. They're tied directly to their physical stats and what armor they choose to use. There are ways to improve those stats, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but this is a long-term fix and not something that happens in the next session. I really like this mechanic, I think, as it always keeps the players thinking of the tactical implications of their decisions and whether they want to risk getting a face full of a Gauss pistol or if they want to use the grenade that they've been carrying around first. I don't really require or push my players to speak in character if they don't feel comfortable doing it. It's really just role-playing in a different form. I'll be honest, I suck at creating a lot of different voices. I do try from time to time to create memorable or annoying characters, but most of that is based on the words that they say and what they do rather than how I act them at the table or how I speak. You would be surprised what you can do by just giving your NPCs some interesting quirks or mannerisms that come through in their manner of speech or their actions. That, at least in my opinion, is how you can create memorable characters. I think it might be fun to go into detail in another video how I come up with some of those mannerisms and actions. I fully expect that my players will love some of the people that they meet and really hate some of the other ones. I like being cringy at times, and I enjoy it when my players laugh at the way that I am acting out a certain character. It really makes me feel good that they're enjoying themselves. So this one's an interesting one, because at least the way I think of it, the referee is another player standing in for the bad guys to try to make the game enjoyable and to put challenges or situations in front of the players for them to overcome. So the NPCs in any game, but particularly Traveler, can be ruthless, devious, and deceptive. It's my job to make the NPCs believable and to be a challenge. I am never actively trying to defeat the players or cause them to fail, and I don't let them win just as easily either. I don't do the arbitrary rocks fall, everyone dies kind of thing, and I don't attempt to put down or kill their character. Failure at something usually relates to a bad die roll or poor life choices. So this is a pretty critical item that I lay out for them. I need my players to know that I'm just another player and I'm not out to get them or to win. The social contract that I have at my table is that we are all here to have fun. I enjoy creating the situations and putting them in front of my players and being surprised at the amazingly convoluted and sometimes completely ridiculous ways that they deal with it. I'm constantly surprised by what my players do, and to me, that is half the fun of being the GM or the referee in any game. Now, it has definitely pushed my improvisational skills to the test a few times, but that's okay, and that's part of the fun. One of the cool options in Traveler, anyway, is to award players a form of experience points after each session that they can use to improve their skills for the future. To me, this is a fun way for them to improve their characters and understand the game system a little better and kind of create the kind of character that they want. In fact, we've even created a whole new skill based on how my players interacted or acted in the situation, and it has been one of the most fun things I have ever added to the game. So, being creative is a really important part of any game. I am not a rules as written guy, and I am definitely not a rules lawyer. I will likely veer off the strict interpretation of a rule in cases where I think it would be more fun to see what happens, or just because I really don't care for the rule itself. I completely respect the people that can remember all the rules and how they're used, but that isn't me. I run my games a bit looser, at least interpreting of the rules, as there are just some rules that I don't think are fun or create the type of atmosphere that I'm trying to build at my table. I've also got no problem using a rule if my players want it, but many times the people I play with are not that interested in the strict interpretation either, and rather the enjoyment of the game system and the fun that they're having with their friends. Another important part of the social contract of our gaming group is that if I make a mistake or a decision a player doesn't agree with, I want to talk about it. I really just say no to any request to do that. I'll explain my viewpoint on the issue and why I think it might not work, but I also want to understand the player's side of the story too. In several cases over my gaming lifetime, I've actually switched my ruling after talking to the player. To me, making sure that the player is a true part of how we end up playing the game is just as important as the game system or the adventure that we're running. Murder hobos are players or their PCs that kill anything and everything that they see. Now, as any GM that's run a game knows, most PCs are murder hobos by nature. That is a true statement across any game system that I have run. But letting the players know that they just might miss something cool or valuable usually has the desired effect of making them at least think twice and possibly wait a few sessions to kill everything. Or at least until after they figured out if they have any valuable information or items on them. There is no better apex predator than a PC in a role-playing game. So you've got to find ways to distract them or make them hold off on that urge as long as possible, just so you can get some mileage out of your NPCs. In almost every game session, we are guaranteed to get off track in the free-form game like Traveler. That phrase, have ship will travel, is very appropriate here. I think of Traveler more as a sandbox in space. You can feel free to take any path that they choose and see what happens. And I have to admit, I am one of those players that doesn't like to be railroaded to a destination. I'm always that guy saying things like, oh, what's over there? Or I want to go down that flooded hallway. Since I know that I am that type of player, I try to make allowances for my players to explore the world that they move through. I think it's important, and it gives the world you're building more of a sense of believability and realism, and it also helps sell the themes or ideas that you're trying to run or raise in the game itself. As I've said before, the players sometimes push me to my absolute limits with my admittedly limited improvisational skills, so I have no problem telling my players that I didn't plan for what they're about to attempt, and we can pick it up in another session. Cutting the session short at that point can also create a sense of excitement for the next session as well. So in some ways, it's a win for both me and the players. So this video was more about trying to give you an insight into my mindset when I'm setting up an adventure or a campaign. By laying out what the expectations are at the front end, I think it helps set the tone for our next game sessions and for the sessions in the future. I think it also helps everyone know what kind of game they can expect, at least my opinion. So saying or writing down these kinds of things solidify the social contract aspects of each game session or campaign and hopefully puts everyone in the same frame of mind. As always, please let me know if you have any questions on what I've talked about today. I appreciate everyone tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for stopping by.